I didn't see you there. I suppose it'd be time to do my coffee house reading. What I've been previously reading over, and I've read over before in great extent, is Alexander Hamilton by Ron Chernow. It's by far one of the best books I've ever read. And I'd like to talk about the summary for a second. Ron Chernow is an amazing author and a historian, whereas he wrote this book right here to explain more on the life of Hamilton. And he started all the way from when he was born in St. Maria all the way up until he was shot by Aaron Burr in the ill-fated duel. Now, the reason I chose this book for my coffee house reading is I think that it brings a new light on revolutionary time periods, colonial time periods. I think that Hamilton starts off and he's born in this small desolate island and he goes through so much tragedy, his father leaving, his mother coming down with an illness and dying, him moving in with his uncle. His uncle was only to kill himself while he and his brother are young. He finally gets out, he gets into the world around his island, and he gets hired at this position as a clerk at one of the local shops. And he shows his diligence, his intelligence, his ability to overcome adversity. And he begins writing poetry, and he writes his poem called Hurricane, and it gets put into the not the New York Press, sorry. He's put in the local newspaper, and it reaches all the way across the place. It gets everywhere. And eventually the shopkeeper that had hired him begins to ask people for funds to be able to furnish a trip to send Hamilton to America, where he can further his education. Hamilton, of course, generously accepts, and then he gets there, and he gets right there, right about 1794, 1795, 1774, 1775. He gets right there, right about the beginning of the American Revolution, and he gets caught up with this weird gang of guys like, some people you've never heard of, John Lawrence, Marquis de Lafayette, and these people he goes on to mess with, even Aaron Burr. He goes on to join the American Revolution, even though he's not from America and he has no real ties here. One of my favorite quotes from at this point in the story is, he wondered why he cared so desperately about about this fate of his adopted country where others seemed to care so little. This really shows that he loved America, and he didn't know why he cared about it. He was frustrated that everybody around him was not supporting the revolution or didn't want to be free from Great Britain, even though they'd all seen the tragedies and the heartache they'd been through. As the American Revolution continues on, he slowly gets more successes in battle, becomes more well-known throughout the American military. Even people like General Greene try to recruit him to be on his staff, but Hamilton says, no, I want to fight. Eventually, all of his reputation precedes him and gets all the way up to George Washington. And George Washington calls him in one day and he's like, I want you to be on my staff. And, being the right-hand man to the chief general of the American military, you're not going to get really that much higher than that. So he graciously accepts, and they begin working together, where they foster this amazing relationship. And George Washington becomes that father figure for Hamilton that he never had. And while they're doing this, he and Aaron Burr become better friends, as well as Marquis de Lafayette and John Lawrence. Eventually they go to this huge banquet where he meets his future wife, Eliza Schuyler. They get married later on down the road, but back to the American Revolution. As they keep fighting, things get worse until the French come in with the assistance of Marquis de Lafayette. And the strange thing is how Hamilton responds to all of this. He's more of he sees this as a detriment to, their democracy, because a foreign power with a king is helping some little country fight off another foreign power with a king, because the country's trying to the America's trying to get rid of their king, but France is trying to help them get rid of their king. It's just a whole weird circumstances, and Alexander goes into very much depth about how confusing and how weird this is. But later on, after the war, he finishes law school in Harvard, and he meets up with Aaron Burr, and they work together to become, fight corruption in Albany, which is in New York. And all throughout their troubles, we have the Articles of Confederation during the time period, which fail miserably, but are able to show everybody that we need a stronger central government, which is what Alexander Hamilton been preaching the entire time. And the Constitutional Congress gets put together, and George Washington insists that Hamilton be invited. And Hamilton is invited, in fact, and he gets there, and he's the only delegate from New York. I think that's a very interesting fact. And when he gets there, he goes on this huge tangent about how he thinks the government should be done, how it should be made. And he gets through everything, with the wonderful ability to do these. And as he continues to speak, more people get his attention, but he gets more enemies because you're not supposed to speak your mind or ramble off. And he was a fiery advocate for a strong central government. He became enemies quickly with James Madison and John Jay. However, they actually gathered together to write the Federalist Papers in support of the new U.S. Constitution. As it moves on, the U.S. government is created, and George Washington is unanimously elected to be the President of the United States of America. And George Washington's first little act right there is he creates a cabinet, Secretary of War, Secretary of State, and the Secretary of Treasury. Alexander Hamilton gets nominated by Washington to be the Secretary of Treasury, which he accepts graciously. As he goes on throughout this position, he learns more about the finances, and he used these skills that he learned from back at his shopkeep back in the Caribbean. He learned how to run a successful business and how to run a successful company. And he just translates that over to the U.S. government and begins pushing for the central bank, which Thomas Jefferson and James Madison and the Southern Democrats are strongly against. Democratic Republicans highly dislike Hamilton just because he's speaking out against them and he wants a strong central government. The story starts to take more of a darker turn as they continue on through the presidency, and he gets through and he meets a lady named, Miss Reynolds, Maria Reynolds, and she actually gets Hamilton to cheat on his wife with her. This becomes the first American, political scandal. This is a big deal. And it's reported right there about 1792 when it picked up as he's getting blackmailed by Mr. Reynolds. And Hamilton actually comes out to the press and is like, I've done this, I'm sorry, Eliza, can you forgive me? And he goes into this dark period of time where he's like super sad because his wife is furious at him. How would you not be? You found your husband's been cheating on you. And it continues, and during this sad state of mind, his son actually goes out. And somebody had been talking smack, some serious smack about Alexander's name, and his son decides to step up and defend his father's legacy. And he challenges this man to a duel, and the son gets killed in this duel, even though he shot towards the sky. And, he was like, I'm not going to fight you. I just want to prove a point that I'm standing up against you, what you're saying. But the guy didn't follow his sense of honor and shot him and killed him. And that destroyed Eliza, and it destroyed Hamilton. It destroyed them so much. She wouldn't even talk to him. He couldn't talk. He'd walk around the street. You'd see him and he'd just be a sad guy. He's just sad. And so what happened was, as they continued to move on, Eliza over time forgives him as Hamilton is always there for her and never does a bad thing again. He wants Eliza to love him again because he did the right thing. He did choose the right thing. But this relationship had hurt him. And the way that the story begins to slowly wrap up is Thomas Jefferson and Aaron Burr in the election of 1800 are actually both running for presidency. And Aaron Burr is out there campaigning. He's a more centralized version of Thomas Jefferson, a less radical version. And John Adams does not stand a chance in the coming up election, even though he was the previous incumbent. So people began asking Hamilton, who are you going to vote for? Who are you going to support? Who should we support, since we know John Adams doesn't stand a chance? And Hamilton comes out and supports Thomas Jefferson as opposed to his lifelong friend of Aaron Burr. And this rocks Aaron Burr, and Aaron Burr begins to slowly look back through his life and think, I failed becoming Washington's right-hand man because of you. I failed to become the president because of you. This is your fault. And he begins writing this series of furious letters towards Hamilton. And Hamilton can only just... If you think there's something wrong with what I said, come say it to me. I believe that I've done my best interest for the country. It just really ticks off Aaron Burr. And you can just tell it. He's just furious. He's so angry. Eventually he challenges him to a duel in New Jersey, because everything's legal in Jersey at the time. And they go down there. And the unfortunate events that happened to Alexander Hamilton's son actually happened to Hamilton himself. Hamilton sets his position up in the duel, and he raises his gun towards the sky, and he shoots in the air. But the horrific fact is that Aaron Burr did not have the sense of honor himself, and shot Hamilton right between the ribs, and he died later that day. One of the last interesting facts I'd say from Ron Chernow's book, one of my last favorite quotes from him, is more than anyone else, the omnipresent Hamilton galvanized, inspired, and scandalized the newborn nation, serving as a flashpoint for the pent-up conflicts of class, geography, race, religion, and ideology. His contemporaries often seem to defined by how he reacted to the political gauntlets that he threw down repeatedly with such defiant panache. I think that's such a fantastic quote because it describes Hamilton's life, where everybody had been born in America, had been raised in American ideals, and they all had their set minds. And then this some guy from the Caribbean shows up and starts throwing race into things, pushing against slavery, and it's like nobody's business. And he throws new ideals down that nobody's ever thought of before, creating the national bank. And people are just dumbfounded by it. And he really shapes the political scene of the early American time period, which is by far this is one of the best books that I've read. It's a fantastic history book. And yeah, I'd say that's my coffee house reading. must say, if you stuck around to the end, good job, you. You